So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to re-explain how to write the names and the formulas for ionic compounds. Now, the important thing for you to remember is you know that you have an ionic compound if you have a metal and a non-metal, a metal and a non-metal. And so that's the order it has to be in. First the metal, followed by the non-metal. Now, there are two different types of metals that you can have. And so this is what you have to distinguish before you start naming or writing the formulas. If you know the charge of your metal, then we say that the charge of the metal is known. Right? And for the metals that we know the charge of, that the charge is known, that includes your group 1, so your alkali metals, so group 1, group 2, which is your alkaline earth metals, and then group 3, in addition to silver, Ag, and zinc. Okay, so just as a refresher, if I look at the periodic table and I'm asked what's the charge of any metal that's in group 1, I would say automatically +1. Group 2, I would automatically say +2. Group 3, I would automatically say +3. Silver +1, and then zinc +2. Now, any other metals that are in your transition metals, these, if I just look at them, I do not know the charge of that metal, so they're of unknown charge. Okay, so for example, copper, cobalt, manganese, gold, tungsten, all of those transition metals, lead, bismuth, all those transition metals, I do not know the charge of them, and so we need to include the charge when we are naming them. So for example, if I gave you MgCl2, first of all, I know this is an ionic compound because magnesium is a metal and chlorine is a nonmetal. Then the next thing I need to decide is, do I know the charge of magnesium always, or do I not know it? Well, for magnesium, it's a group 2 alkaline earth metal, so I always know the charge of magnesium. So I don't need to include the name, I don't need to include the charge of magnesium in the name. So all I would write is magnesium chloride. Because just looking at the periodic table, I know magnesium's charge is 2. Now, what if I were to give you instead manganese chloride? If you look at the periodic table at manganese, it's a transition metal. I don't automatically know the charge of manganese. So as a result, I need to include the charge of manganese when I write the name. Well, if you want to problem solve it, chlorine has a -1 charge. But since there are 2 chlorines, that means chlorine contributes a total charge of -2, which means that the charge of manganese must be +2. So when I write the name, I would write manganese 2 chloride. All right, so let's try one more. Okay. What if I gave you that? So you've got lead and nitrogen. Well, all right, this one's going to be a little tricky. Well, let's first see. Obviously, the name of this would just be lead nitride if I know the charge of lead. Well, looking at the periodic table, I can't automatically determine the charge of lead. So I've got to include it as a Roman numeral. Well, if you notice, lead has a -3 charge. Since there are 2 of them, that means nitrogen contributes a total of -6. So nitrogen is -6 because nitrogen has a -3 charge. Lead, however, so lead needs to have a total charge of +6 so that it can cancel out this -6. Well, since I have 3 leads, that means each lead must need a charge of +2. So when I write the name of this, it's going to be lead 2, and then I just finish writing it. So it would be nitride. Okay, so moral of the story, guys, once you realize you have an ionic compound, what you need to do is say, all right, do I know the charge of my metal? If I do, don't need a Roman numeral. Do I not know the charge of my metal by looking at the periodic table? If I don't know it, I got to include it as a Roman numeral, as I showed in these couple of examples. And that's it.